The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast, featuring Jeff Upson and Eric Knopsnyder. PA Power Wrestling. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
What's going on, wrestling fans? You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Upson, joined by Eric Knopsnyder. And Eric, we haven't hit summer yet, but man, it seems like we've been removed from wrestling for quite a long time. Does it feel the same to you?
Yeah, it's been a while since Pittsburgh and the NCAA tournament, huh? Feels like it's been forever.
It really does. I mean, and you know, I was just talking with some of the fellow Pittsburgh Wrestling Classic folks the other night, and I was saying how I really needed a break for like a month this year after wrestling. I don't know. I was a little bit drained. I needed to decompress a little bit and kind of spend some time away from wrestling. That may have to do with the fact that I'm married now too. So, but it feels like it's still been a while since we really dug into and dove into some wrestling.
It has been a while, and hopefully we're going to be able to do this on a more regular basis now. A little bit of a change since we last did a show. I'm no longer in the newspaper business. Got some normal hours now at a marketing job, so hopefully we can make this a regular occurrence and bring this to wrestling fans everywhere on a weekly basis, definitely during the season.
Well, wrestling news certainly hasn't stopped, even though we did. There's been a lot going on here, specifically in Pennsylvania, and we're going to touch on it for probably the majority of the episode, and that's the PIAA and the possible upcoming changes that our state may see. But before we dive too deep into that, because that's going to be a little bit, Eric, I want to talk about some of the things that have been going on since we last talked to you. The National High School Coaches Association Virginia Beach Duels took place over Memorial Day weekend. It always draws some of the best wrestlers from across the nation year in and year out. You have the best teams. You have some super teams. Team Kong once again came out on top. They're a super team from best wrestlers from all across the nation. They actually took out Team Shut in the finals. There was some Pennsylvania wrestlers in that dual meet in the finals. Joey Fisher from South Park, he was in there at 106 pounds. He fell to Braxton Brown. And then Michael Wolfgram from Central York, who's going to be going to WVU in a few months, he won against John Birchmeyer at 285 pounds. That's a big win for him. You remember Michael Wolfgram lost to Jake Slinger in the state tournament, and Birchmeyer actually beat Slinger here at the National High School Coaches Association duels in Virginia Beach. So Wolfgram beating Birchmeyer, I thought, was a solid win for him.
And Jeff, I didn't think you could love Michael Wolfgram any more than you already do, but now a WVU commit too. What does that do for you?
Oh man, I mean he went from a 9 to a 10. Real quick, you know, I mean, I was always a huge Michael Wolfgram fan, but then when he went to WVU, my alma mater, I was stoked, obviously. So, he probably would have went down a few points had he gone to Pitt. So, sorry, Eric, I had to throw that out there. So, it's been a while since we had some friendly banter going on. So, there may see some of that. But you look at some of the Pennsylvania results from Virginia Beach. I mean, there was a ton of guys down here competing, state champions and state medalists all across the board here. We had Team Nauman, Young Guns, Quest School of Wrestling was down there. You had just Diesel, all kinds of teams. I forget how many teams were in the high school division, but it was over 300, I believe. It was a ton of teams here, and there were some notable results too. And it was really hard. I was trying to keep track of all the results, but it was just
impossible.
It was next to impossible. You know, it was hard enough to follow the dual meet results, but then to go in and find the individual results was even more difficult. So, but some that I know stood out to me. One that really struck a chord with me was Clayton Ulrey from Team Nauman Green, the Lower Dauphin product. He is a rising senior, and he was a state runner-up this last year at 160 pounds. He lost to Trey Kibe in the finals. He beat Garrett Ninehouse from Young Guns Black 8-2. Wasn't really much of a match. I don't know if you went back and watched that or not, Eric, but Clayton Ulrey really controlled the match. And Ninehouse didn't have the best weekend. He also lost 15-10 to a non-Pennsylvania wrestler. But Clayton Ulrey, I mean, a state runner-up last year. Garrett Ninehouse was the most, he was the outstanding wrestler of the AAA tournament, having beaten Edmund Ruth, preventing him from winning 3 state titles. And Clayton Ulrey, I mean, he's like, hey, I'm up 10 pounds and no big deal.
Yeah, I did not get to see it, unfortunately, but that's an outstanding win for Clayton. He's really been coming on over the past year, as you said, getting to the state finals this year, and just a phenomenal win there, as you said, 8-2 over Ninehouse.
Yeah, and there was actually some other notable results. Colby Whitehill from Team Nauman Green, the Brookville state champion at heavyweight, he actually had a rematch of the state finals against Jake Ryan. This time around, he pinned him. He pinned him in 227. So Whitehill committed to Clarion. I think he's an absolute great find and great keep for those Brookville, that pipeline from Brookville to Clarion. Colby Whitehill is going to, I think, do well at the next level, and he kind of showed how he's developed since March.
Yeah, and he has a rough weekend for Jake Ryan there. I know a couple losses for him, but, I don't know. You never want to put too much stock in summer, because these guys have to have a chance to just work and get better and not worry about results so much. I mean, everybody, of course, wants to win. You never want to have your name attached to a loss there. But, I feel in events like this, you can go ahead and kind of wrestle loose and try some things. And that may have something to do with results. I'm not taking anything away from Colby Whitehill. He's outstanding. And as you said, I think he's going to be really good for Clarion. Great way to keep a guy there, as you said, with that Brookville connection, and keep him there. But I try not to put too much stock into some of these things, but they're certainly fun to look at, in a slow time of year like this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're a couple months removed from the high school season, and we have guys at probably weight classes that they're maybe not used to. But I mean, I agree. You don't want to put too much stock into off-season results, but you definitely have to take note of that. And like a win for Clayton Ulrey over Garrett Ninehouse, I'm pretty impressed by that win. Sammy Hilligus from North Hills, he wrestled for Quest School of Wrestling Black. He beat Jonathan Myers from Team Shut Nation. John Myers, of course, is the former Easton wrestler who transferred to Wyman Seminary. So a kind of tight match there for Hilligus against Myers. Side note, Hilligus actually started competing in freestyle. I've been kind of nagging him for the last couple of years of like, hey, when are you going to start wrestling freestyle? And he's always like, I don't know, maybe this summer. And,
so you were the motivating force behind this decision.
I'm not saying I was a motivating force, but I would definitely tell him like, why aren't you wrestling freestyle? I was like, I don't know, I don't really like it. I don't wrestle it. I'm like, yeah, you don't like it because you don't wrestle it. So Mason and I both kind of got on him a little bit. So I'm happy to see Sammy wrestling freestyle. Nick Coy from Penn Trafford, well, no longer Penn Trafford. He's now going to Virginia with his older brother Cam Coy. He actually had a nice win over Ridge Lovett, who came in ranked number 3 in the nation by Flow Wrestling. So that's a good win for Nick, because Nick really didn't have the end of his career that he wanted. He was a state medalist, but he had a couple losses at the state tournament that he probably would have liked to have back. So it's a good win for him. Anthony Hinson from Spring Grove, he pinned Luke Nichter from Diesel Chambersburg. So Nichter obviously was a state runner-up a couple years ago, and Hinson had a nice win over him. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, Eric. We could probably go on for a while. In fact, there was another one that I missed here that I wanted to touch on. Cole Urbis from State College. He had that kind of monumental collapse at the state tournament this year, coming in undefeated and one of the top-ranked guys in the nation. He loses twice. He actually beat the guy who won his state bracket. He beat Kyle Schwartz from Northern York. He beat him by major decision, 8-0. So, I mean, when they say if you don't show up on the Hershey, the weekend of states, he could have been. I mean, I'm pretty confident that you wrestle that 10 times, he's probably going to win it a couple times. He just didn't win it that weekend. Kyle Schwartz did, and but Cole Urbis is clearly capable of bouncing back from that.
Yeah, Urbis is really, really talented. We know that. As you said, he didn't have the weekend that he wanted in Hershey, and unfortunately, he's going to have to live with that. And I'm sure that's going to be something that he looks back on over the years. But he's got the opportunity to go on and do great things in college. And if he does well there, nobody's going to remember too much the high school weekend there in Hershey.
Right. I mean, Keith Gavin's a national champion. No one knows that he didn't win a state title in Pennsylvania. He's a national champion, right? So it doesn't really matter as long as you end your career the way you want it. So I think he'll be just fine. But clearly that shows that he's obviously doing some things to improve his wrestling. Again, Eric, just a lot of different wrestling going on here. A lot of studs that were down there. I mean, I counted, I think at least 10 state champions were down there from Pennsylvania, maybe even more, because they're just sporadic over all kinds of teams here, but just a lot of fun to watch. And like you said, it's kind of a good experience where they get to let loose a little bit, and maybe try a few different things and, see how things go down at the beach.
Yeah, this is one that I've never been to, but I know everybody who goes to it just raves about it and says this is one of the best events of the year. So, it's no surprise that they get the quality that they do because everybody wants to be a part of it, and you've got these big-name teams. But then, as you said, there are so many teams there that you can find somebody at your level. You can find teams that are the Team Kongs that are just unbelievable, and Shut and Young Guns and that level. And then you've got teams from other states that maybe are a little lower that aren't quite there. And then, you keep going down where the way it works out in the bracketing, everybody gets to wrestle somebody on their level.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have a lot of guys that, maybe not have the earlier rounds. They may not have the strongest of competition, but pretty soon they're going to have some of that tough competition. Nationally ranked wrestlers, right? State medalists and champions. You're going to have them. So yeah, clearly this is a good experience for all levels of wrestling, not just those elite guys, but this is where you see a lot of those second string guys, or maybe those regional qualifiers really find their confidence and find their groove. And, maybe that helps them propel them to the next year and doing some big things there. That's really why we started the Surge, to have those guys kind of compete against some higher level guys and see where they're at, see where they stack up.
Yeah, and as you said, that's a great way to see, this is still early, still a couple months after the season, and then as we get rolling into it a little bit more, get a little closer to the season, you get Super 32 and the Surge and things like that, and you can kind of see how these guys have developed over the summer. Because as we said, you see it some here with some folk style competition like this, and then you see how they do in freestyle and Greco, and maybe go to Fargo and see how things go there. And it's just kind of the progression of the season and the progression of the careers for these kids.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And, looking forward to seeing some of these guys, hopefully at the Surge, which I guess we might as well bring up now, Eric. The Surge, the second annual Surge, we have set a date, and that is going to be on Saturday, November 2nd, 2019. We're going to be running it 2 days, the Saturday and Sunday, so the second and the third. We're going to again be at UPJ, the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. Beautiful facility, great atmosphere there for wrestling. We were very pleased with the way things went last year for us, and that's why we're back here again. We're really excited about it. We're hoping, we think for sure that it's going to grow in numbers. It's just going to be, I think it's going to be even better than it was last year, Eric.
Yeah, I agree. The response we had last year from the people who competed in it, the wrestlers themselves, coaches, parents, everything was so positive. And I think that word has spread. People saw what it was like last year, heard what it was like last year, and it's just going to be an even bigger event this year and as we go forward.
Yeah, and the big reason why we wanted to have it at that time is because the Super 32 is actually moving up their dates. The Super 32 is going to be on October 12th and 13th down in Greensboro. So that's actually 3 weeks before the surge. So I know a lot of wrestlers, unfortunately, they went down to the Super 32 and got banged up or just a little bit burnt out. I mean, it's hard to compete week after week, especially that earlier in the season. So I think this is definitely going to help us get some more kids, more quality kids coming in, because now you have a 3 week, essentially 20-day break in between the Super 32 and the Surge. So I'm definitely hoping to get some more wrestlers, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Like you said, Eric, I think the word spread, and I think I think we did a good job, and I think we're going to continue to build upon that.
Well, you broke down the numbers. Talk about what those guys ended up doing last year that we had at the Surge. First year, first time tournament, but the competition that we had was outstanding. How many state champions did we have out of the field?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty incredible to look back at the numbers, especially for our first-year tournament. We had 4 state champions compete in the Surge. Carter Dybert from Franklin Regional. He was actually a runner-up at the Surge, but beats Dylan Chappell, a rematch of the Surge finals in the state finals. That is pretty cool to see that match happen in the Surge finals, and then how many months later we saw it in Hershey. So Dybert actually avenged that loss in the Surge finals, and he won a state title. Jackson Arrington from Forest Hills, he won a state title in Double-A. He was a Surge place winner at 106 pounds. So he didn't win the Surge, but he went on to win a state title. Alejandro Herrera, he actually won the Surge and the state title. So that was his second state title as a sophomore, and he won the Surge tournament at 113 pounds. Jacob Ely from Hopewell, he was a state champion for Hopewell, and he also won the Surge. He's also going to UPJ, Eric. So yeah, I know Coach Pecor was happy to have him there.
Yeah, he liked the Surge so much, he said, hey, I'm going to stay here, wrestle for the Mountain Cats.
Right.
But the other interesting thing about it is you brought up that he was a state champion. We had a couple of Surge participants get a rematch in the state semifinals, too, with Kenny Kaiser and Eric Gibson, who wrestled 4 times throughout the year, beginning with the Surge, and then a couple more times. I think it was King of the Mountain that they wrestled at?
Yeah,
and
King of the Mountain as
well. In the state semis as well.
Right. Yeah, and Kenny Kaiser was able to upend Gibson in the regular season and actually face Ely in the state finals. So that leads to a good point. We had 35 state medalists who competed in the Surge last year. So 35
That's
wrestlers.
Incredible.
Yeah, 35 wrestlers who competed in the Surge. And quite frankly, I mean, we didn't have a large – I mean, we were able to do it in one day. So the tournament wasn't – we didn't have – large numbers, we didn't have huge brackets, but 35 wrestlers that competed there were state medalists. 74 were PIAA state qualifiers. That's a number that really speaks out to me because and that's the kind of guys that we were attracting. We wanted to attract were maybe those regional qualifiers in the year before, and now they're state qualifiers. Maybe those state qualifiers are now state medalists. So 74 overall state qualifiers, 34 state medalists, 4 of which were state champions. We had a PJW state champion, Rocco Welsh, compete. National prep finalist Dayton Delvisco from Malvern Prep, he was there as well. So, I mean, it's just nice to look back and see all the talent that was there and possibly see it again, this coming year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be even better this year. As we said, there were so many people talking about it, how much they enjoyed it. It was, it went very smoothly. It was done pretty quickly. So everybody was really happy that we talked with. And I think it's just going to be a phenomenal field this year. We've gotten the word out, started talking to some people about it. And hopefully this year we get more participants, especially the big guys. We'd love to see, it's tough with preseason with football going on, but hopefully we get some more bigger guys, and who knows, maybe we even attract some more out-of-state people as the word spreads.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, I think it's going to grow, and I'm looking forward to it. So registration is open for anyone listening that's eligible to compete. We're accepting 8th graders through seniors and anyone who wants to compete. You can register on the Flow Arena. You go to Flow Arena, you go down to November 2019, you'll see the Surge by PA Power Wrestling. You can go on and register today. Registration is open. One guy that is not going to be eligible to compete, but he did learn that he's going to get 2 more years of wrestling, Eric. This is kind of breaking news, and that's Penn State national champion at heavyweight, Anthony Kazar, who was told he can have 2 more years of eligibility in the NCAA. That's insane.
I've never heard of this. I honestly, I've never heard of anybody even asking for 2 years. But they said that because of the injuries that he's had, we've heard of guys being granted a 6th year of eligibility, but I've never heard of a 7th. Maybe he's on the doctorate program. He's just going to keep going to school. But actually, he hasn't actually said whether or not he will come back, as far as I know. Right? He's considering it.
Right. I just recently read an article on Penn Live that said that he was considering going back. He said, right now I'm leaning towards going back to Penn State to defend a national title. But his goal is ultimately to make the 2020 or shoot for an Olympic team. So, I would be very unlikely, I think, that he would compete two of those years. That's just my opinion, but I could see him coming back for another year. I'm sure that's something that will help him develop as a freestyle wrestler and wrestling up there with the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. So that's a huge boost for Penn State to have him coming back into the lineup. I mean, heavyweight, they definitely needed some help there had he not come back, or if he doesn't come back. So big boost for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, like they needed it, right?
Yeah, they definitely are in need of a big boost. So that's pretty breaking news up in Happy Valley. The other big news out of that region is Lock Haven. Now, not only are they starting a women's team, which is awesome. It's the first Division I program in the NCAA to have a women's team. Ronnie Perry, the former national runner-up, is going to be leading that team. I'm really, really excited about that. He's a Slanco native, so he's going to have a lot of Pennsylvania ties in there. So I'm super pumped to see what happens up there at Lock Haven.
Well, and, it's Matttown, USA. There's so much tradition there in Lock Haven, and it's always been the men. It's great to see now that Lock Haven is adding a women's program. Really, the biggest name, as you said, that's added a women's program, a Division I school in men's. But yeah, this is phenomenal to see them. We've talked about it over the years about how we want to see women's wrestling grow, and the level that we need to get to is like a Division I women's program. We've had that with women's wrestling, and it's doing very well there. But, you need to get it at some of the Division I schools and continue this growth. And Lock Haven making a huge stride towards that as they add it. And as you said, hire Ronnie Perry to be their head coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just a huge boost to not only women's wrestling, but Pennsylvania wrestling as a whole. I mean, I think this is you're gonna see some of those Wyman Seminary girls stay in state and go to Lock Haven and compete there. It's only this is a great spot to have a women's program because Pennsylvania wrestling has such promise with the Wyman Seminary team, with Adeline Gray being there, Aaron Tomei there. It's just huge for the state as a whole. And I can remember, Eric, back in the day going up to Lock Haven camps in the summer, and there would always be a decent amount of female wrestlers up there. Like there always seemed to have a group of female wrestlers competing up in the summer camp. So I definitely think that women's wrestling has had a presence in Lock Haven, and it's just nice to see that it's being officially recognized up there. And I'm just curious because Scott Moore was definitely in the running for that Maryland job, and I think it was pretty much his if he wanted it, but he decided to stay at Lock Haven. I'm sure he had something to do with the fact that they brought a women's team there.
Yeah, the rise as they hashtag everything. It's definitely a program that is building towards a much more success than they had. There were some down years there for Lock Haven. When I was in college, Lock Haven had a phenomenal program, but has dipped, and Scott Moore has really taken it to new heights again. And as you said, doing this just solidifies that culture of wrestling that surrounds Lock Haven.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm excited to see where the things go for Lock Haven and women's wrestling in general. So hopefully we see some other teams follow suit and get on the train here, because this is the future, right? Is women's wrestling, and this is what's really going to help save wrestling overall. So looking forward to seeing what happens there. Looking ahead at some of the other things looking back at some of the other things that took place. Trent Hidley, the Mifflin County native, the NC State freshman. He's going into his sophomore year down there, and he'll be a redshirt freshman. He made the junior roll team in freestyle, and he did it at a weight where I was kind of surprised to see him up that high. Eric, did you see where he competed?
What weight was it? I know he was up, and it was like, whoa, how'd he get that big?
Yeah, it was 189 pounds. He actually wrestled his old clubmate Gavin Hoffman, a 3-time state champion from Montoursville in Ohio State, true freshman. He wrestled him at the U.S. Open. And then he ended up getting a bye to the World Team Trial or Finals, and he ended up making the team, winning in the best of 3 match. So I was very impressed with the way Trent wrestled, especially after seeing him kind of not finish his career where he wanted in Fargo. He lost to Aaron Brooks, Aaron Brooks is a phenomenal wrestler in himself, and he went on to do big things at the World Tournament. But for Trent to go up that high and to beat guys of that quality, I was very impressed with him.
Well, the easy joke to make here is lots of hoagies. But obviously, if he's doing that well, that's not hoagie weight that he's adding there. That's just some serious muscle and talent that he's continuing to showcase.
Yeah, I mean, he does look big. I mean, he certainly looks big. He didn't look undersized at all for the weight, but he clearly he's doing something right where he's getting bigger and putting on some mass that is helping him. And his quickness hasn't slowed down either. I mean, he still looks like that kind of, he's banging in for those underhooks. And I was excited to see him make it that far and to get in to compete on the world stage, because he's a guy who, like we said, I mean, he's had success before, but this is something different here. Now he's going to have a chance. Remember, Hayden Hidley, his brother, he made a U23 world team, so it must be something in the family lineage there.
Well, NC State certainly agrees with the Hidleys, and they love them down there, what they've been able to do, as you said, in freestyle, and Hayden, what he's been able to do in folk style, a couple-time All-American now, and, really gave Jason Nolf all that he wanted and more. So they're very excited about what they're able to do and maybe get both of those guys in the lineup next season.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would have been surprising to see him at 86 kilograms, but I'm happy to see him there. It actually kind of throws a wrench into where he ends up in the lineup for NC State, whether depending on what Nick Reenan does and some other guys there. But NC State, man, they're going to be a force to reckon with. They've just always been, kind of chipping away and making strides. So I'm excited to see both Hidley brothers in an NC State singlet and competing and representing Pennsylvania.
Now, as far as an Olympic red shirt goes, that would be this year. Would that be this year that guys would be taking Olympic red shirts? Yeah,
they would be taking it this year.
So would you think like a Reenan would after being in Final X last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on his health, because he was pretty banged up, and I believe he may have had surgery. I'm not 100% on that, but I think depending on his health, he could. Possibly, I mean, he's certainly eligible for one. I know Flow Wrestling put out a list of all the eligible wrestlers to compete in or take a Olympic red shirt, and Reenan's definitely one of them. I know one of the biggest names is Jaden Ironman from Missouri. He's one that has announced that he'll be taking an Olympic red shirt year.
Maybe Anthony Cassar can take an Olympic red shirt year and then get an 8th year.
Theoretically, I guess he could. He could take an Olympic year next year, and then he would have 2 years left of eligibility. So he could be 30 and winning his 3rd national title. I mean, I'm not sure that's the way he wants to go, but I guess maybe it's possible. I mean, look at Matt Brown. I mean, he was pretty old when he competed for Penn State and won his national title on a locked hands call. May I add? Eric, that must have been sour for you to watch, having Wilps being in the national finals. And
yeah, that one stung. That
was a tough one to watch. Other guys competing in the World Team Trials, Sammy Sasso, he fell to Brayton Lee, a guy he had beaten earlier at the U.S. Open. He fell to him in a best-of-3 finals. Brayton Lee kind of been his kryptonite. We saw him actually lose to him in Fargo a couple years ago. So was really hoping Sammy would pull it out and get onto the world team, him and Trent together, but it just wasn't in the cards for him. Hopefully he, but regardless, he still had a heck of a tournament, making the world team trial finals to be there at a tough weight, 70 kilograms, with guys like Ja'Cory Teamer, and of course Brayton Lee, Anthony Artelona. So guys that have beaten him before in the past, he's now sort of taken over a little bit. So unfortunately, he didn't make the team, but he did have good results. U23 is happening this weekend. Jake Woodley from Oklahoma will be competing. A couple other guys from Pennsylvania will be competing as well, and we'll obviously keep you updated on that.
Yeah, 15 of my Pitt Panthers out there.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, Mickey Philippi is probably one of the bigger names. Nino Bonacorsi also being out there. So yeah, a lot of Pittsburgh wrestlers will be out there. Eric, how do you think they may do?
Obviously it's going to be difficult. It's a pretty stacked field, but I don't know. Does Mickey's style really translate well to freestyle? I'm not sure. Nino, I would think would probably be a better fit with freestyle.
Yeah, I definitely think Nino probably style translates a little bit better. Mickey, I don't know. I haven't really watched a ton of Mickey in freestyle. So I know he's competed in freestyle. So, but yeah, I think Nino probably has maybe a good shot at least making some noise here. So Akron's always a good time. I mean, Akron's always. This is kind of like the jumping off point for high level wrestlers. We've seen Spencer there, Dayton Fix there, Gable there, Yanni there. They're just the best of the best have all come through Akron. So hopefully we'll see some Pennsylvania guys do well there.
Yeah, the cadet side is really kind of fun to watch because we've talked about it before. Whenever you get these opportunities, and the Surge being one of them, to see these young guys really step forward, and that's kind of what the cadet at Akron. You get to see these guys who you maybe know a little bit about and you've heard of, and have done some things, but they kind of really step onto the national stage at the cadet level. Yeah,
and Willie Saylor came out with his sleeper picks for Akron and the cadets, and Pennsylvania had one on their Mac Church. He's from Waynesburg. He's actually an 8th grader. He'll be a 9th grader next year, and he's won 2 PJW state titles. But he picked him as a sleeper at 45 kilograms. So we'll see how he does. But we'll definitely keep you posted on all the Pennsylvania results from Akron at both the cadet and under 23 World Team Trials. Eric, let's change gears here. We had all this kind of good news about growing wrestling and women's wrestling starting up in Lock Haven, but we had some pretty disheartening news recently, and I've heard murmurings about this for actually a couple of years now, and I had a feeling. I talked to some folks in the know, and they said that most likely they were going to be doing this, and they did in fact, and this is obviously the 12 weight classes, cutting 2 weight classes out of the 14 weight classes and actually changing the weight classes, and now the lowest weight class would be 110. It's pretty bad. There's only one good thing that I will take away from this, and the only thing that is I would have to buy less state medalist shirts and ship out less state medalist shirts. That is it. That is the only beneficial thing that taking it from 14 to 12 weight classes that's the only thing. Everything else, it's terrible. It's just absolutely, it's atrocious.
I'm not necessarily against the move from 14 to 12. I mean, I came up with 12 and then it went to 13 and then to 14. I've lived through the 12 weight class structure. It's not awful. My biggest problem is with the weights. I'm partial to the lightweights. I'll admit that, and 110 as the opening weight class is really big. Yeah, I know that 106 is sometimes difficult to fill. For dual meets, you do have forfeits there. But that weight class to me is so important once you get to the postseason level, because these are the guys that are going to grow into your middleweights and really strong wrestlers. These are the guys that are wrestling year round. You look at our surge weight class. Did we have any problem finding 106 pounders?
Not at all, no.
No, it was stacked. As you said, Jackson Arrington was at 106 there, and he didn't even win a title, did he? And went on to win a state title. I mean, to me, the lightweights are the lifeblood of the sport, because these guys, as I said, you can come up as a freshman and wrestle 103 back in the day or 106, and you can wrestle there and get your varsity experience, maybe take some lumps if you're a little smaller, and kind of grow into that weight, and eventually, a 19 or 25 or 30 or whatever, 32, wherever it is, you can kind of grow into those weight classes, but you're still getting that experience at the varsity level now. Now what happens to some of these smaller guys that we've seen that even 106 was a little big for them? Because, we've seen guys like this that aren't quite big enough for 106, but they grow into it, they wrestle, and they continue to get better. Now you're asking them to make 110 whenever a guy might only weigh 90-some pounds. I mean, that's a huge gap at that weight. The difference in percentages is massive.
Yeah, I mean, it's the weights. I mean, so I will disagree with you. I think the 12 weights are absolutely horrible. I know we've had the 12 weights before, but guess what? We used to drive Model Ts too, and we don't do that anymore. So just because we've done it before in the past doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. I definitely think the changing of the weights are pretty bad, because not only. So these would be the projected weights for a 12-man or 12 weight class system: 110, 118, 125, 132, 138, 45, 52, 60, 70, 90, 215, and 285. So you're going from 170 to 190. I mean, that to me is so ludicrous that you would think that the way that the weights are now, that you think it's okay to go from 170 to 190. I mean, that's idiotic in my opinion.
That's a huge jump, and I know that you're trying to keep the weights there, but my problem is I see a lot of forfeits at the upper weights too. I'm not sure the 215. We for years had went 189 and then heavyweight.
Yeah, 189 to heavyweight. Yeah, that's how it was.
And I would rather see that than take it out at the lower weights, because, as I said, I mean, I'm completely partial to the lightweights. I'll admit that, but those are the guys who are wrestling in the summer. Those are the guys who were coming to the Surge. The problem that we had at the Surge and at preseason tournaments and summer and things like that are the big guys, because so often they're playing football, and that's fine. I don't begrudge those guys that, but at the same time, they're not putting the year-round time in, and a lot of times teams are just looking for someone to fill those weights. They're saying, hey, okay, yeah, you're a football player. Why don't you come out for the wrestling team? Because you can wrestle 215 or 220 as it is now.
Yeah, so let's break down how exactly this happened. So the PIAA, the steering committee, they proposed this. They took it to the PIAA board of directors, and it passed. And it passed in a resolution, a provision to decrease it from 14 to 12 for the 2020 and 2021 academic year, and create a 3-year pilot program. Okay, that's what is being considered. Now, the next time they meet on this won't be until April of 2020. So we have a long time before this is even kind of brought back to the table. However, this is something that would have pretty big impact on the state overall. So I'll read to you what exactly Dr. Lombardi, the executive director of the PIAA, said was that there was an increased number of forfeits in the lower weights, and they felt that if they cut the weight classes down, they would then cut down the number of forfeits and make dual meets a better experience for fans and coaches. I have a lot of issues with that. So, number one, wrestling is an individual sport. That's just there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is an individual sport. Yes, we have a team aspect to wrestling. However, dual meets have been failing for many years now. Some dual meets in some areas, they're not that exciting.
The problem is in my area. I mean, I've got a lot of wrestling talent in my area, but I've also got a lot of small schools. I mean, everybody that I covered locally is a double A school almost, except for one. And those teams are really struggling to fill weight classes. So I do understand the impetus behind this, because we've got dual meets that last 15 minutes. I mean, it doesn't make sense for a school to travel 45 minutes on a bus to go weigh in and wrestle a 15-minute dual meet.
Right.
That's what
right.
these non-wrestling people are looking at.
That part is where I think a lot of the issues are, where you have these 15-minute, dual meets where you each team wrestles a total of 3 bouts and the rest are forfeits. I'm more in favor. So this is me being more in favor. I would rather them keep the 14 weight classes and just entirely get rid of dual meets. I'm all for that. You're not punishing those wrestlers that are not going to have that opportunity to compete on a wrestling team. By you cutting the number of weight classes, you're cutting opportunities for wrestlers.
But you're also cutting opportunities whenever you have a dual meet. The good thing about a dual meet is you can have it at your high school. You can have all your friends there. You can have the entire class there. Everybody that's in the school has the chance to come and watch it and not put in a 12-hour day. Tournaments are great. They're wonderful, but they don't get school support behind them for the most part because, A, you might have to travel a long ways to go to the tournament to watch your buddies wrestle, and B, most people aren't going to have that kind of time commitment to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night watching it. So the dual meet has its place. Is it the most important thing in wrestling? No. But to get that school support behind it, I think the dual meets are tremendously important.
I mean, I disagree. I don't think school support really matters. Some schools support wrestling, some don't.
When schools are dropping programs, absolutely school support matters.
No, well, sure, but I don't think a dual meet necessary. I don't think a program. Reynolds is maybe a definitely a team that does not fit in this category, but you have a team that just because they're bringing in a few kids to watch the matches doesn't make it better for the school overall. I mean,
absolutely it does. If I'm an AD and I don't know the first thing about wrestling, but I go to a match and there are 7 people there and it's over in 15 minutes, I don't see any reason to support that. Even if my team is going and doing well in tournaments, if I don't see that, if I don't see what's going on there, that's going to leave a negative impression on me. But if I go there and there's a packed house and a really entertaining dual meet, then I say, hey, I might not understand this sport, but I can see that it's popular.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Cutting the weight classes down from 14 to 12 is not going to make a dual meet any more exciting. Is it? I mean, do you really believe that taking the weight classes from 14 to 12, all of a sudden now we're going to have some great dual meets? No.
I'm not saying that they're going to be great dual meets. But there's another issue here that really kind of gets me, and that's whenever we have potential matchups in these. Okay, you've got Team A has 5 guys on their squad, and Team B has 7. And we have the potential for matchups at a lot of weights, but the coach is saying, well, yeah, I could wrestle my guy here at 32, but he's not very good and he's probably going to get pinned. So if I bump him up to 38, if I win the toss and he gets a forfeit there, then we've got a net 0 balance instead of a -6. And so coaches are worried more about winning that dual meet in a situation like that than getting their guys experience.
I mean, you're talking about growing the sport, and I saw a comment somewhere from someone outside of Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania. They said, what the heck is Pennsylvania doing? And they said, but what do we know? Like, Pennsylvania is the best wrestling state, so maybe they're on to something. I really don't. So the PIAA has consistently and regularly been they've failed wrestling. And what I mean by that is we still don't have women's wrestling sanctioned. New Jersey does. We have other states across the nation that have sanctioned women's wrestling. We are still kind of in the dark ages of not having that. We're now petitioning to reduce our weight classes because of lack of participation. I don't think you change lack of participation by lowering the number of opportunities for wrestlers. That's not how you solve the issue. This is a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, essentially. This is not going to change dual meets. If you think that reducing the weight classes from 14 to 12 is going to make some exciting dual meets, and you don't know anything about wrestling. I think it's simple that if the problem is in fact forfeits and dual meets, then we need to change the makeup of the dual meets. Make the dual meets different. I don't know. How about this? This was I saw this somewhere on the interweb somewhere, Eric. I don't know if it's Facebook or Twitter, but I say this. You have a bag, right? You pull out of the bag 8 weight classes. Okay, you pull out 8 weight classes at random, and you say, okay, you're going to wrestle these 8 weight classes in the dual meet, and you put out your 8 wrestlers. If you have the wrestler, wrestle them. If not, you forfeit it. But instead of saying, okay, now we have to wrestle all 14 or all 12 weight classes, now we're randomly drawing maybe 8 weight classes instead, and maybe hopefully you have 8 guys that can wrestle. So
we want a 2-minute dual meet?
I mean, if it's
that makes no sense to me.
If it's exciting,
why would you want to have guys there?
I'd rather have weight classes that actually compete as opposed.
So you'd rather say, okay, we have 10 guys here, but we're not going to wrestle them because they weren't the weight classes that were drawn. That makes no sense.
It makes more sense than cutting down 2 weight classes for the
it doesn't.
individual
Not in
postseason.
any way.
There's nothing that you're going to say that's going to convince me that cutting down from 14 to 12 weight classes is better for the sport of wrestling. It's just not. I mean, wrestling is an individual sport. You're taking scholarships away from wrestlers. You're taking opportunities away from wrestlers.
How are you taking scholarships away from them?
Well, you're going to have less state champions. You're going to have less state medals. You're going to have less state qualifiers. So
you want to give everybody a state medal?
I'm not saying
you're
everyone needs to
be sending out even more shirts.
Absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you're reducing the opportunity to grow the sport of wrestling. I think anybody who understands wrestling understands that you're hurting the sport in growing it by reducing the number of weight classes. It makes zero sense to fix the problem by saying, you know what, we need to change the weight classes. We need to make it from, 103 now is 106, then 106 is now 110. New York has a 99-pound weight class. They let 8th graders wrestle. I've always been a proponent of letting 8th graders wrestle in high school competition, because you look at the number of talented 8th graders out there. I mean, Ryan Crookham would probably win 5 state titles. Spencer Lee probably could have won 4 or 5 state titles. And, I think 8th graders should be allowed to compete. That way you're opening up more opportunities for those wrestlers to fill in those forfeited weight classes. What do you think about that, Eric?
I don't have a problem with that. I'm not really sure what the logic is. And I don't know enough about how all schools, I went to a tiny school where basically the elementary, junior high, and high school were all under one roof almost. So I don't really know how it works. 8th graders are going to be in a different school in some of the larger schools, correct? They're not actually going to be at the high school.
Right, yeah. So, for example, in 8th grade when I wrestled for the junior high team at Central Dauphin, we got bused to Central Dauphin High School and competed, and we practiced at the high school, but just in a different room. So, I would assume that's probably the case for larger schools where some 8th grade students aren't actually in the high school, so they would have to get bussed over, or something like that.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a prohibitive thing that would be that difficult.
I don't.
If you've got a couple kids that want to move up to the varsity level at 8th grade, I'd have no problem with that.
The point being is, if we're concerned about the number of forfeits, then let's expand our pool of eligible wrestlers and try to get 8th graders in there, because number one, 8th grade wrestlers are all pretty darn tough. I've seen a lot of tough 8th graders competing throughout especially the last couple years. It seems like just the level of talent at 8th grade. When I started wrestling, I think I was in fourth grade, and I was late. I was like behind compared to kids that were wrestling, since they were in preschool. So you have so many guys now that by 8th grade, they can do well at the high school level. So why not open it up? If you're concerned about forfeits, open it up to 8th graders to now have them compete, and you fill the ranks up. I don't understand why we say, hey, we have a lot of forfeits in our dual meets. Dual meets aren't exciting anymore. I think the solution to this is we cut down the number of weight classes, because dual meets, yes, they're important. I like dual meets. I like a competitive dual meet. But the look at the state dual tournament in Hershey. Are there many fans there, Eric?
No, absolutely not. And I've always been baffled by that. And I don't understand. Like a good example for me is Chestnut Ridge, which I see all the time. You know, they're close to me here. Powerhouse program, rabid fan base. They wrestle a duel, a weeknight duel, and you go there, and it's hard to find a seat at times. I mean, they get a lot of fans. Everybody turns out for it. You know, home match, raucous atmosphere, great, all that. They wrestle district duels, and the way District 5 works is the top seed always hosts. So, which for the past, 8 years has meant that Chestnut Ridge hosts. But you go there for district duels, which in theory should be better matches than those just one and done dual meets that they wrestle during the regular season. And the place is not even half full. I don't get it. It's never made sense to me that and I think part of it is the student population turns out during the weeknight matches, but for whatever reason aren't there on Saturdays.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just not. I don't know. I don't see how. I mean, you're that concerned about attendance of dual meets and the. I mean, dual meets, the dual meet state championship, the biggest state, the biggest dual tournament there is in the state. You're barely filling up the bottom section of the Giant Center.
You're not.
Well, you're not filling it up. I mean, you're hardly filling it up. So
no, and you're right. I'm really disappointed every year at the numbers.
So why are we looking at it? I mean, with the individual tournament, at least we're still seeing large numbers of
yeah, but I think this is all emblematic of a larger problem for wrestling, and that is, as great as the clubs are, and they've elevated astronomically the top level guys. What we see at the top level of the PIAA now, I think is head and shoulders above what we saw 25 years ago. But I think the problem lies in that we don't have the middle ground that we used to. Whenever I was in school 25 years ago, you had the guys who trained year round and were really good, and did very well. And then you had those middle guys who were good, but they didn't dedicate their lives to the sport, and they were still pretty decent. And then you had the guys who just kind of came out because they could fill a weight class, and, the coach asked them in the hallway, hey, why don't you come out for the team? And so you had kind of three different tiers of wrestlers: the really good guys, that large middle ground, and then the lower guys that were kind of new to the sport. And I don't think that you have much of that middle ground anymore, because guys have to either commit themselves to doing it year round, or they're not going to be successful. They're not going to be able to even win a district title a lot of times if you're not wrestling year round. And so I think we've lost that middle ground. And that's where you really see the depth start to take a toll, that it doesn't have the depth that it used to. That top level is phenomenal, but you're getting guys that are really good who are getting 10, 12, 15 forfeits in a season.
Yeah, well, I mean, so let me ask you this, Eric. I mean, what does this do for wrestlers that maybe aren't the top tier wrestlers? And I think they're going to get squeezed out. I mean, you have less opportunities for them. I'm probably going to quit if I'm a JV wrestler and I have less opportunities to get into the lineup. That's probably, you're probably not going to have too many teams with a lot of depth if, like we have been seeing.
You don't have and this is, again, we come from completely different backgrounds. You came from a powerhouse program in AAA. How many guys were on your varsity team?
A lot.
Do you think most years?
I don't know.
40?
Yeah, maybe 30.
30? Okay.
At least 30.
On mine, there were 6.
Right. No, I understand.
And so you're talking about depth. There is no depth. The schools I'm talking about have no depth. There is no such thing as a JV team. There's no such thing as not getting to wrestle because you can't beat somebody out in a lot of these teams. A lot of these teams, you just go out, you make weight, and you're the starter. And for those teams, yeah, dropping from 14 to 12 is a good thing, because now you're not down 12 more points than you were as soon as the match starts.
Yeah, no, I see that, and I just there's again, dual meets are kind of like an added bonus almost to me. Like,
okay, so what do you think then of? And this wasn't the PIAA proposal, but I've heard this pitched. What if you have the 12 for a dual meet, or even an odd number, which makes much more sense than an even number. But at any rate, you have one set of weight classes for duals, and then you wrestle all 14 in the postseason.
Yeah, I've said that before, that if you want to change the weight classes, have them change for dual meets and still keep the 14 weight classes for the individual tournament. I've also said that change it for AA and AAA. Since AA is the ones that like you just said, we come from two different backgrounds. Why, if AA is the ones having all these forfeits, then why don't reduce the weight classes in AA, leave them alone in AAA?
I guess the complication becomes then what happens when you have a AA and AAA wrestling one another.
Well, I guess you can. I mean, I don't know.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying I could see more complications there. I think it makes perfect sense to have, if you're concerned with this, and obviously they are, then, go to the lower weight class system and for the dual meets, but keep them for the postseason. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anything to keep the number of wrestlers engaged and competing, because what we see is right, and the youth numbers are they may not be as big as they once were, but they're not that small. We still have, you go to PJW states, and this, Eric, it's pretty stacked. You got a lot of big brackets, a lot of wrestlers competing, and then we lose them, and then we lose them somewhere. We somewhere along the line we're losing these wrestlers. And is it because there's less opportunity?
No, I don't think you're losing the upper level guys. Those guys that are PJWs, you have a handful maybe that don't wrestle in high school, but most of those guys are continuing to wrestle and continuing to excel. It's those kids that don't make it to PJWs, and they're like, what am I doing all this for? I go to practice every day between November and March and, get my head beat in, and then I don't even make it out of my region. So, what's the point? I can go home and play Fortnite all day.
Yeah, I guess if that's what you're into. I mean, well, we opened it up for discussion on social media. I want to read some replies we got. Shane Simpson said, "Seems sad to me. I'm not understanding how this helps the sport. I don't see a single positive that outweighs the negative. So what do the smaller kids that have been wrestling since they were 6 do when they get to high school and there's not even a weight class for them?" Yeah, I get that the smaller kids are I mean, I remember, you were a smaller wrestler. I mean, imagine 110 now as the smallest weight. Sheldon Seymour, who just won a state title, I mean, he was like a 90-pound wrestler his freshman year. I mean,
yeah, I weighed like 98, I think, my freshman year, and they had just changed it then, so 103 was kind of big for me.
Right. Susan Denny says, "I think it's a bad idea. Wrestling is a small person's haven. It'll be hard for kids who can't crack a line up until junior or senior year. Lowest weight class used to be 98, then 103, 106, now 110. The smaller kids lose out. I've seen far more forfeits at higher weights than lower." I mean, I agree with you, Eric. I've seen a lot of forfeits in the upper weights too. I mean, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I would.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing that. Anecdotally, just looking at it, it seems to me like there's a problem at both ends of the lineup.
Yeah,
that the middle weights, are a lot easier to fill than either the upper or the lower. But I would, as I said, I would tend to give those opportunities more to the lower guys, just because you have those young guys who can step into the varsity lineup and otherwise can't do so if, it might be a few years. Like she said, very good point there.
Dana James Edwards says, "Terrible idea. I can't believe they do not have a better plan, i.e. making weight reductions for just dual meets, allowing more than one wrestler per school at tournaments and during postseason, expanding the weight classes for postseason, etc." Well, that's exactly kind of what you said, is maybe just having the less weight classes for the dual meets only, not the individual. Allowing more than one wrestler per school at tournaments. Now, I don't know if you saw the recent news from the PIAA board of directors meeting, but they did say that they will allow teams to weigh in 2 wrestlers at the same weight class at tournaments with 9 or more teams during the regular season.
And that's beginning this season,
that's beginning
right?
this season, 19 and 20. So the PIAA will allow, I want to say this again, 2 wrestlers at the same weight class at tournaments with 9 or more teams during the regular season. So in theory, it's up to the tournament directors though. And Frank Volcano said, like the power rate's not going to do that, and which makes sense. You can't possibly fill
just because of size.
The size, right? But another tournament, maybe like I don't know, Tool City or the Brandywine Bullets Invitational. You have tournaments that you got two wrestlers at the same weight. Go ahead, you can enter both of them. I think that's a phenomenal idea. I'm glad that they're doing that. I wish it was for the postseason too, though.
Yeah, I have no problem with this. This makes sense. And I agree with you. You know, you don't say, okay, Team A, you're great in track and field. You have 2 just phenomenal 100-meter dash runners, but you got to pick one. You can't put them both in. Not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that I agree, and Dana Edwards kind of alluded to that, you know, and I think we like her ideas of doing that for dual meets, reducing it, but yeah, I don't know. It's those are some interesting ideas. Let's see some other folks who had some things to say. Timothy Kunkel. I really don't like raising the lightest weight classes again. Plenty of 106s out there. My biggest issue with duels is not the number forfeits. It's forfeiting around the best wrestlers. Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of, I mean, strategic dual meets where you don't have the best wrestlers heading off. You have you have the Ryan Andersons wrestling a second string guy and you're telling him not to give up bonus points, but I get it. It's strategic. Obviously, we'd like to see the bigger guys go head-to-head.
Would it help, and I know this would take all that strategy out of it or a lot of it, but would it help to say you weigh in and that's the only weight class you can wrestle? No bumping after you weigh in?
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting – that really would change the dynamics for – yeah, so you're saying so you have to wrestle at the weight you weigh in at. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like it's completely foreign to the sport because when was the last time you see a college bump around? I mean, college, basically, you weigh your guys in, you throw them out there, and you see how it shakes out.
Yeah.
I mean, I do like that in a really competitive, good dual meet. You're like, oh, well, if this guy bumps here and they do this, then everybody shifts, and it's kind of exciting. But if it's better for the sport, you know, why not say, hey, you just weigh in and you wrestle that weight class. So you got to make your decision. You
bring up a good point with like the college because, you know, when Penn State wrestles Arizona State, you're not like, oh man, I hope Mark Hall and Anthony Valencia, I hope Zahid Valencia, I hope they wrestle because, you know, they could bump around. You're like, no, like neither one of them are going up to 84 and you know, bumping away from each other. They're wrestling. They're going head to head. You know that match is going to happen.
Yeah, so it's not like that you can say, oh, well, it's not wrestling anymore if you can't bump. I mean, you know, the highest level doesn't. It just, as I said, you weigh in and you go out there and wrestle.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, something that could be explored. Dylan Chappell, state runner-up from Seneca Valley, says, I believe that this provides more opportunities to teams who are unable to fill a lineup as well as a smoother transition to college. Although it may discourage some kids unable to break the lineup, I also believe that the positives outweigh the negatives in the change. So, yeah, I think there's definitely...
That's a pretty well thought out response. I mean, even if you don't agree with him, you got to say, hey, you know, he's got a good head on his shoulders and is looking at this from a pretty good perspective.
Well, our buddy Susan Denny responded to that and said, but it hurts programs that already have full lineups. Now you've got more kids fighting for less spots. Some returning wrestlers will be fighting for a spot that they had before, which makes sense. I mean, you went from 14 starters to now 12, and, you know, now you're going to have 2 guys out of the lineup and maybe 2 less guys competing in the sport of wrestling. I mean, I you know, and that's where my personal experience comes in. You know, I was unfortunately on a team that had a ton of quality, so I had to fight for my starting, you know, spots. And, you know, those, you know, up until senior year, you're always trying to battle for a spot. in that lineup. And there was definitely times where I said, "Is it worth it?" I'm getting my head banged in every day, and I'm not getting a lot of action. So luckily, I stuck it out. I'm glad I did, but I can see where the downfall could be. Kyle Martin from the PAWF, he says it seems oxymoronic to say that we want to grow the sport while at the same time lower the number of opportunities for athletes to compete. Poor decision. Right thing to do if making 12 weight classes is to allow multiple entries at each weight class per team. So I think we keep on hearing that same thing, and the PIAA obviously is responding to that, but I'd like to see them expand that to not only regular season but also the postseason with entry.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, is wrestling the only individual sport, where they say you're limited to one participant? Track and field certainly isn't that way. Swimming isn't that way. As far as I know, I don't know a ton about swimming, but I'm pretty sure that you can enter multiple athletes in one class. I mean, there may be a limit. I'm not saying that a school should get 7 132-pounders, but certainly 2 doesn't seem like a problem.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at some of these districts, how small the numbers are.
So, yeah, I agree with you. I don't know much about other sports like track and field to say like whether you're allowed to enter one or more participants, but I definitely don't see how that would be a negative thing for the schools. I mean, imagine that. Imagine you have two wrestlers, at the best weight classes, and you're saying, hey, we are so good that we had multiple wrestlers place at one weight class. Like that. That's, I don't know. That's pretty neat to me.
Well, and there definitely are. I'm guessing there are quite a few schools that could have an all school final in the district final. That some of these bigger schools, again, it's much different for a lot of the schools that I'm looking at, because they're lucky to have one person at each weight, let alone 2 really quality guys. But when you look at some of these AAA powers, I'm sure a Bethlehem Catholic, some of their backups could place in the postseason.
Yeah. I mean, and look at some of our college teams too. I mean, you have guys that are, they're fighting for spots, and they could probably win look at all the All-Americans that got beat out this year for their respective teams. You had a ton of
Chandler Rogers,
right?
All-American.
I mean, that's crazy. Nick Neville's, he wasn't able to compete. Why not enter more than one wrestler? Maybe the NCAA should look at this too. Bob Marlowe says, bad move. Does not address the problem of forfeits. Only creates less opportunities for kids to wrestle. Kids are already being held back in 8th grade because they're too small to make 106. If kids can't find a weight class, they'll quit. Then what? Make less weight classes? I mean,
I could definitely see more kids being held back now, because if you are on the smaller side, I mean, what's the advantage of going up there and wrestling junior high again, I guess? But, especially if there's a possibility that in 10th grade you're not going to be big enough for 110, which I've seen kids that are like that, then why not hold them back?
Right. Yeah, that's true. Tad Habert from Latrobe, well, now from Dallastown, former head coach at Latrobe. He said, reduce to 13 to save a weight class and eliminate dual meet criteria. I like that. I do like going to an odd number. Go 8, 108, 114, 120, 126, and then run college weights. Have no December weight allowance, and allow multiple entries for postseason. So some of the things
that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't understand why we're making. You've got what? 110, 118. So some of the best wrestlers that you have they have 2 weight classes that they could possibly compete in there. Yeah. Especially 2 below 125. That seems idiotic to me.
Rolly Stillings, the mother of Josh Stillings, has a pretty interesting take on this. She says, it'll cause more weight cutting. What is an 180-pounder to go? He can't compete at 190. He'll have to cut to 170. It is the wrong direction to move the sport in. I am very happy my son is out of high school. That is just one issue. All of the rest has been said.
Yeah, I mean, and I do get that. I mean, that's a big gap.
That's a huge gap. That's a huge gap. I mean, like you said, if you're 180 pounds, what are you going to do? You're going to drop 10 pounds, I guess. Kyle Wallace says, I really just wish they would have spread them out differently. Leave 106 and eliminate 220 altogether. Any kid that can't cut down to 195 is more than big enough to succeed at 285. They will have to wrestle heavyweight in college anyway, so why not just have them start there now? I mean, yeah, it is. He does have a point that, you have those guys that when they wrestle 197 or 220 in high school, where are they going to go in college? You're like, are you?
That has never made sense to me. Yeah, why you have that weight in high school,
but not
when there's not an opportunity for you there in college,
right?
It's stupid. Yeah, as he said, you could go like 195 there, or go up to heavyweight, since you're going to have to do that in college at that level anyway. Now, I agree that it's different when you get to the lower levels. Guys that aren't elite and aren't going to be wrestling in college. That's a big gap. But I think that's less of a problem than some of the other things we're seeing.
Donnie Geibel from the Pennsylvania Wrestling News Magazine, he said, I wrestled 103 pounds all through high school. I would have been far less successful if that weight class is 110.
Yeah, I agree completely. I wrestled 103 as a freshman, sophomore, and a junior, and even considered trying to make it as a senior. But I certainly wouldn't have had as much success if it had been 110. I mean, I would have had to grow into that for a couple of years to see 110, and I think as a senior I even got down to like 108. So, that would have been really big for me and really difficult.
Brad Kennerding says it will not fix anything. It will most likely hurt the sport. It takes one simple move to grow the sport. Drop the points. Let iron sharpen iron on the schedule, and attendance will go up. What do you think?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I don't know. I guess the only drawback I could see is if coaches are a little too ambitious and are trying to wrestle, 10 matches a week and kind of get burnt out there. But I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a real concern, if that would be too much. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, again, anything is better than dropping 14 to 12. I mean, it's like, you're the lesser of two evils. I mean, obviously I'd like to see, obviously we need to address the problem of forfeits and the lack of growth in our sport. I think that's an issue, obviously. However, I don't think the solution or the logical solution that is somehow reducing it from 14 to 12. I'm more in favor of dropping it down to 13, possibly eliminating that 220 pound weight class. I don't see how taking it from 106 to 110 all of a sudden. I mean, that to me is probably the worst. The 12 weight classes, in my opinion, is not good. But the worst thing about that is the size difference. That having that lowest weight be 110. I mean, it's unfortunate because wrestling is, like someone said in the comments, is like it's the small person's haven. You can be successful at those lower weights. And not just have to be the biggest and strongest. You can still be successful at those weight classes.
Well, and another point that I heard the Flow guys bring up, which I hadn't thought of, is, and I know there has been talk about reducing the number of junior high weight classes as well, but the way it's set up right now, the weight classes are geared towards lightweights in the junior high, and then all of a sudden you expect them all to get big by the time they get to varsity.
Yeah.
Like it's not a gradual change. It's, we've got like 7 weight classes below 100 pounds in junior high, and then you have to weigh at least 110 when you get to varsity.
Yeah, that's silly. That's silly. It's kind of like the 220 and then go to college and you have 285 and 197. That's it. So I don't know. I would say 98% of the folks I've talked to since this decision came out have all had displeasure in this. So if that's the case, then I'm pretty sure this is probably the wrong thing to do. Would you agree, Eric?
Yeah, I'm not defending necessarily the move from 14 to 12. I get the idea behind it. I'm not nearly as offended as you are because I see some of the struggles that teams have in trying to fill 14 weight classes. So I get why someone looks at it and says this is a positive. If you have more than 14 wrestlers, then yeah, obviously it's a real negative because people are losing opportunities. From the standpoint I'm looking at it, is a lot of these schools won't be really losing opportunities for anyone. They'll just be forfeiting a lot less.
I agree.
Again,
the smaller schools will be forfeiting a lot less. The smaller schools will be forfeiting a lot less. They're not really going to be affected by this, but that leads me back to, okay, maybe the classifications need to change, and you have like a smaller tier, and you have these schools like in Dubway, then maybe you reduce it down to 12.
The bigger fear for me is a lot of these schools are looking at this and saying, why do we even have a program? We have 14 weight classes. We can't fill half of them. Let's just drop the program and we'll co-op with a school, a half an hour away. And you get 2 or 3 guys maybe the first year that go out for that co-op. And in a couple of years, it dries up completely. And now you've lost opportunities for all of these guys, not just 2 of them possibly per team.
Eric, I think it's safe to say that this is not the last of the discussion on the weight class changes, and unfortunately, I think that this is probably going to be something we're discussing many times in the future. And I just think overall, it's sad. It's sad that this is where our sport is in the biggest wrestling state in the country. It's slightly depressing that we're having this conversation and that things aren't going better for the sport of wrestling in Pennsylvania, especially given all the success that we've had in recent years with growing the wrestling on different levels and seeing the success of those wrestlers that we've seen. It's just sad. Would you agree?
I do. I mean, we don't want to see opportunities lost, and that's what this is for some guys. We'd love to see every team have 14 or more guys, fill in every weight class, but that's not what we're facing, and we have some kind of tough decisions to make. And I hope that our discussion isn't the only one going forward on this, that the people that have the power to look at this and decide on it are discussing this as well and looking at some of the options that we brought up.
Well, you know my opinion on that. I have little faith in the folks that hold the power, but then again, I don't know. Maybe they'll surprise us. I think it speaks to a larger problem, Eric. And this is the last time I'll bring it up, I promise. But the problem lies in those feeder programs, those foundational programs, and we're clearly. The sport is dwindling, and it's not just dwindling in high school, right? We're seeing it where we're not, for some reason, our programs are not doing as well as they have in the past, maybe. And I think it starts on that ground level with the youth programs and seeing those wrestlers find some success when they're younger and continue competing throughout. The goal is we want to see more wrestlers compete in the sport of wrestling. We want to see more students in all age levels be involved in wrestling, right? We think that wrestling teaches the values that will make you a successful person in life. So clearly, when you're doing something like this, I think you take away those possibilities.
Yeah, and I think some of it is the sport specialization. We talked about how the upper level guys are so good because they're wrestling year round, and that's great. But, they're not then playing baseball or football or soccer or whatever else they might be doing. And it works both ways. Now I can't tell you how many coaches I've had tell me how pissed off they are because their 106 pounder wants to lift and get big for football. It's just ludicrous sometimes that these guys are saying, "Oh well, I can't wrestle because I got to get big for football."
That's funny.
If you talk to higher level football coaches, they'll tell you they love to have wrestlers on their team, especially the big guys. They want their football players to wrestle in high school and get that balance and get the footwork and get the hand fighting and get all those skills that transfer over, especially to line play.
Yeah, but 106 pounder, you're not. I don't care how much.
I might have exaggerated a little bit.
I don't care how much you lift. You're not going to become an offensive lineman.
I guarantee you, I've had lightweights that our coaches tell me that they're lightweights. Say no, I'm not wrestling because I want to get big for football. You're 120 pounds as a sophomore. You're not getting that big for football.
Right. Well, I think this school will probably transition into some more discussions, especially about the club scene, and talking about how, like you said, that one sport specialization, and seeing how these top it's almost like the rich keep on getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Does this affect more the top tier wrestlers or the bottom tier wrestlers? I would say probably more the bottom tier wrestlers. Top tier wrestlers are probably going to do well regardless.
Still going to make their spot. Yeah.
Would you agree, Eric?
They're going to make their spot. If you're a state championship caliber guy, you're not really worried. I mean, if you weigh 182 pounds, you're going to be upset, but you don't know at this point that you're going to weigh 182 pounds when these changes take effect. The big concern is for those guys, like you said, who are kind of middling to lower level guys that now get pushed out of the lineup that might have had a starting spot before.
Right. Well, we'll see, and we'll be sure to give you some more feedback on this, and please give us your feedback. Let us know what you thought of our discussion, and what you think. If you think we're crazy, we're nuts for what we said and what we advocate for. So you can go on Twitter at PA Power Wrestle on Twitter and let us know your thoughts on the discussion and what you think may be the better solution to this, and how you can make a difference. So Eric, we've got a lot going on in the next couple of weeks, though. I know we have Akron going on this weekend. We'll also be releasing our class of 2020 top recruiting rankings, so that's going to be a really nice list of all the wrestlers that are going into their senior year and where they stack up. And a lot of those top guys have already gave verbal commitments to colleges. A lot of them are pouring in right now, so I'm really excited to show that to everybody. And, of course, the Surge, right? The Surge registration is open, so make sure you get on there and register for a spot.
Yeah, lots of big things coming up. Obviously Fargo is one of the key points in the summer. We're a couple months, a little over a month away from that. And then before you know it, we'll be back into the fall and getting ready for the Surge.
Well, as always, stay tuned in to PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs. Follow us on Twitter at PAPowerWrestle, and, of course, like us on Facebook. And until next time, Eric, Pennsylvania wrestling fans, keep it classy.